Most of us are familiar with 3D in the cinema. So how does this work? In what other areas can it be used in live events?
Well, yeah, most people, 3D is becoming much a bigger part of our lives, and most people, in this room have watched 3D, have seen 3D. If you go onto the high street, if you go into any of the retail outlets in the shops, 3D is pretty much all of the plasmas and the LEDs displays are 3D capable now. So it's there, and it's going to be in the home. What I'm going to talk to you about today is the different types of 3D, and if you want to use it on an event, what you need to know, what's the differences between the different types of 3D. We've got a 3D 103-inch plasma outside, and you've seen that. That 3D is active 3D, and I'm going to come on to that. But I'm going to talk about some others. 3D at the moment is being used, mainly it's being used for exhibitions and experiential events. It's not really being used much in large-scale events because often it's out of context. It often doesn't relate to the content of the meeting. But with smaller audiences, sub 200 people, active 3D, which is what you've seen out there, is the best option, allowing for better viewing angles. The subject matter is also a very important factor. It works well for automotive, medical, and manufacturing events and clients. But you need to be a little bit more creative with 3D for the financial and banking sectors. Now, we've seen it used for awards dinners, events, mainly as an opening piece. It's usually run at the beginning, and then everybody takes their glasses off, and then the conference carries on in a normal way. In this instance, 3D is used as an effect in order to provide something different and novel.
So you mentioned some of the differences there. Can you elaborate further on the differences?
Well, yes, I will elaborate on the differences because this is quite important. There are a number of different ways to create a stereoscopic image, a 3D image. The image, when it's viewed, is very similar, but there's a number of ways of getting there. All of them require the viewer to wear glasses, except for displays using lenticular lenses on the display. And a product, I'll mention the product now, you've probably seen it or you've seen it being advertised. The Nintendo 3D game, it's a lenticular lens. You don't need glasses. The problem with that is that you have to look at it straight on. You can't move it to the side or left or right. There's a very, very narrow viewing angle. Now, this is going to be difficult to use in events and certainly experiential because people are going to be moving around and you lose the 3D effect. They are working on 3D without glasses, but we're some way off yet. So I'm not going to spend much time discussing the merits of lenticular lens 3D. I'm also going to ignore the older anaglyph 3D using red and green colour glasses that was used in the 50s and 60s for 3D shows. That technology has disappeared now, and I can't see that coming back. Now, you can split 3D stereoscopic projection or display into two different categories, passive and active. Passive technology can be then split into polarized and colorized. Let's talk about polarized. We won't talk about colorized, we'll talk about polarized. Polarized is currently the most common form, and it's the form that's used in cinemas and IMAX theatres. Real D is the main manufacturer of the 3D material that you see in cinemas, and you're using glasses that are polarized glasses in order to view it. Now, in order to achieve that, if you achieve that on an event, you need two projectors, one for each eye. Now, in the cinemas, they can facilitate it with a single projector, and you can ask me questions about that later. I won't go into the technology now because I'll bore you, but I'm quite happy to talk to you individually about how they do that. But with passive, each projector needs a filter on the front or rear of the lens. One is horizontally polarized, the other is vertically polarized. On the glasses, they have a diagonal upwards for one eye and downwards for the other eye. Now, the glasses for polarized, for passive, are cheap and they're disposable. They cost about 75 pence each. But in order to display the 3D, you will have to have a silver surface screen because you cannot disrupt the polarized light, the polarizing effect. It has to stay intact, and it will only work on a silver surface, a specific silver surface. So this sort of surface, you won't get a 3D effect. With active 3D, the audience wears glasses with LCD shutters. So these have got electronic shutters in it. They're moving very, very quickly. You can't see it, but that's what you were looking at when you were watching outside. These are synchronized through wireless technology to the display device. So only one image can be seen through one of the eyes at any time, but because it's moving so quickly, your eyes are fooled into believing that they're seeing the images at the same time. By using very high frame rates, as I've explained, the image can be flashed between each eye without any noticeable flicker. Now the 3D imagery with active is very good, and you only require, if you're using projection, you only require a single projector to do it. And you do not need a silver screen. You can do it with normal screen surfaces. An ordinary front or rear surface can be used. The glasses, however, are not disposable. 3D active glasses, instead of being 75 pence, can be anything up to 50 to 75 pounds each. So there is a big difference there.
Yeah, so be careful you don't sit on them. I was going to say, how about
Exactly,
those cost a pretty penny? And so obviously the glasses cost more. What about in terms of video? Does it cost a lot more than producing a standard video?
Well, it's the thing that puts most people off. If people are asked about 3D and clients come about 3D, they instantly think, that sounds expensive, it's going to cost a lot of money, and we've got to go into 3D production. I'm not quite sure how that's done, and it all sounds very expensive. But there is an increasing number of 3D production houses now. So the cost of 3D acquisition and post-production is getting less expensive. It's still relatively expensive, but the price is coming down, and it will continue to come down. It really depends on what the subject matter is. But as a guide, it's approximately 50% more expensive than shooting in HD. Now, the cost for displaying 3D, again, depends on what technology you use. Active only uses one projector, and this projector can be the same projector that you use for your PowerPoint and your video, and you can also show your 3D on it. So you only need one projector plus a backup, obviously. Active glasses are an additional cost, but you can hire the active glasses, and these will cost you about £100 per 50 for a day. Passive 3D, as I've said, uses two projectors. And these have to be dedicated for the 3D because you're going to have the filters on those projectors. So if you're trying to use them for PowerPoint, you're going to get a very dim image out of them, a lot of light reduction. And also, the silver surface is not that great for wide viewing angles as well. It's very linear and throws the light back in a very straight line, so you lose a lot of light out to the edges. But all of this sort of, what I'm talking about in terms of the pros and cons, Blitz will assist our clients through this process and make sure you've got the right technology for your particular event with the right solution and for your budget.
Okay, so Paul, I've got my budget sorted, I've got my head around all of the bits and pieces that I need to do and to prep. How do I then go about producing a 3D video?
Well, first of all, not surprisingly, you need a 3D camera. And there was one displayed here. You have two lenses, two actual cameras within a body, one for the left eye, one for the right eye. That's what you need if you're shooting live footage. However, if you want to create 3D graphic images, then these animations can be produced relatively simple, using packages such as 3ds Max or Maya, for example. And Blitz have got these systems in-house. Either way, you end up with two synchronized images, one for the left eye, one for the right eye. Now, the viewing offset of those two images is about 6.5 centimeters, which isn't a coincidence because that's the average distance between the pupils of our eyes. Now, this can be manipulated in post-production, and manipulating this distance can be used to increase or decrease the 3D effect. In some instances, sometimes 3D, and people sometimes complain that after looking at 3D for a while, they get sore eyes or it becomes uncomfortable. This may be because the production process, they've manipulated that distance and your eyes are having to try to pan inwards in order to look at the image. Now, editing is done on a 3D edit suite in the same way as you would edit a 2D standard or high definition image. Playback using stereoscopic images can be done in various ways, using digital hard drive or 3D DVD, Blu-ray discs, that sort of thing. Now, the choice of active or passive playback can be made at the last point. It can be made at a later stage. So when you are acquiring your 3D or creating your 3D, you don't have to worry about whether you're going to do it passively or whether you're going to do it active, or you get an active system. And you can do both. So you may have an audience where you decide it's experiential, it's small, and I'm going to do it with active, or a really large audience in a large auditorium, and you may decide you're going to do that passive. But the content remains the same.
That must be quite a plus, because obviously just leaving some of those decisions as late as possible, especially
Exactly.
nowadays when things don't happen sometimes till the very last minute, that can really be important. You don't actually know if it's on or not. That's really good. And do you think that 3D animated graphics are, 3D generated graphics, are better and more effective than ordinary images, sort of standard images?
Well, it's true that 3D graphics animations are often easier and cheaper to produce. They require a good designer and a fairly powerful PC platform. Live footage requires 3D cameras, as we've explained, but they also require a really experienced 3D director. Certain shots work on 3D, other shots don't work on 3D. And if you're paying for that time, you want to get somebody who's done all this before, an experienced 3D director who knows what works and doesn't work. Otherwise, you're going to burn a lot of time on site and in a shoot. At present, a large percentage of what's being produced and shown at live events is either graphics or animation. And the subject matter is important. For instance, if you want to shoot lovely panoramic shots with lots of depth, this will work well on 3D. While if you're mainly shooting head and shoulder stuff, vox pops and stuff, then you really don't want to use 3D because it's not really going to add anything. You're not going to get the full effect out of it. So it will not suit everybody's event or budget. But given the right subject matter, given the right circumstances, it can really enhance an event. So, 3D. Let's just recap on 3D, and then we can go to question and answers in the three presentations that are given. 3D, increasing number of production houses to choose from, and the cost of 3D is coming down. It's still expensive, but it's reducing. It's not everybody's cup of tea, and it won't work for every event, but it will add another dimension to your meeting or conference. And different display technologies suit different events. So you don't have to get hung up on one. You can either use active or passive, and we will guide you through that process. And as I say, we'll always recommend the right solution that is right for your budget.